Gotta do this right. Mic check. Ha ha ha. All right. The lights are lighting. Things are working. What's up, everyone? I am going to be talking about water quality. We're going to start it on water quality. Lord knows where we'll end up. Somebody already in there. Welcome aboard. All right, so I'll hang out for a sec. Usually we get some guys coming through. If you have any questions about water quality testing, that's going to be the subject. Usually, water testing is done around a fish kill. You can sometimes, depending on the person's personality, get them to sign up for some monthly water checks. While you're there, I would usually do basic water quality checks like pH, like alkalinity, like total hardness, like oxygen, things of that nature on a regular basis, and report back. Hooking up. What's up, my guy? Welcome back. Talking about water quality, or at least starting to talk about water quality anyway. Lord knows where we'll end up. Sometimes people, usually a water test wasn't a hard sell for people, to add a few bucks onto a contract for like picking up trash and doing weed and algae control. They would want some basic water quality monitoring, right? And if you pay attention at all to Instagram, I made a post about it last night, I think, or yesterday. I had a guy, I don't know, I was trying to be clever. I guess I was trying to draw parallels, using photography as a example, because that's really how it works. A water quality test is just like a snapshot, right? If we wanted to see how I looked in 1991 when I graduated from high school, we would get out the annual and we would look at that picture, and it wouldn't tell you anything about how I look today, right? If you didn't know me, and just showed you a picture of me when I was in high school. So here's this guy in high school, right? That's what he looked like, and that's what a water quality test would look like. So, for example, say we had an oxygen kill. That's going on right now with the heat. And for anybody who doesn't know, anytime the water warms up, it lessens its affinity to hold oxygen. So warmer water holds less oxygen than colder water. That's just physics. So on an oxygen fish kill, if you're lucky enough and the fish start to pipe, I call it piping, they'll be at the surface gasping, basically creating their own aerator with their mouth because there's no oxygen in the water. So they're using the atmosphere and trying to aerate the water across their gills. You'll usually see that in the morning, piping at the surface, and that's a bad sign for oxygen depletion. And of course, we would look for that usually the hottest time of the year when the water is at its lowest for holding oxygen. And that would be kind of a reasonable conclusion to come to before you even stepped on site. So the oxygen test the day before or the month before or the year before is pretty irrelevant. You need the snapshot right then. Just like to know what I look like today, you need a snapshot done today, not in 1991. Hey, Anthony, thanks, man. Appreciate you. Arkansas, what's going on, man? Welcome back in. All right, let's see. While we're on, We've already got one coming in. So let's look what hooking up's got here. Last year, they had crazy temperatures. The water was 86 degrees, and it's usually 76 degrees, right? And during summer, thousands of dead fry, 1 to 3 inch fish. Okay, so there is another observation, right? You go see, you got really hot water, and you have a lot of dead fish. So that was a pretty good kill, because usually you see the larger fish have a higher affinity, and they need oxygen. So you see the big ones die before the small ones usually. So, like I said, I would literally have to be on site that day, the day of the problem, with the oxygen meter or the water test kit to see if the oxygen was the actual problem, to get that measurement to confirm that 100% with the oxygen meter, because a lot of times that's not how that works. The fish kill occurs, and then it'll be a few days to maybe a week, depending on how, your schedule and what's going on, before you can even get to the pond, right? What if the pond's 8 hours away or 4 hours away, and you have to travel and you have to do those kinds of things. So you get there the next day. Well, the next day is not the day of the kill. Funny side note, I don't understand people's disrespectfulness. Like I said, I was trying to draw a parallel on that post, and one guy, I was just being clever. I was using a picture of photography that we had done years ago here. Now it was a flooded car picture. That was kind of a group effort here on the page for those of you who've been around a long time. And I don't know, it's a pattern that I've noticed with the younger people today. They don't seem to have consequences for their actions. He said something about I should just write a poem or something, but actually a effing poem, I guess, meaning maybe my he didn't see that I was trying to draw a parallel there between photography and water quality. And I don't know really why that guy got blocked, though. I'm not, you're not going to curse at me when I'm only trying to help. And I see that a lot, though, just in everyday life with the younger generations. They think everything is the chat bar, and I'm not listening to it. This doesn't pay enough for people to curse. Yeah, there you go, Dave. Consequences. So if that dude comes through and cares to explain why he cursed at me like that, well, I won't care. I'll still leave him blocked. Don't appreciate that. But that's not the point, just an observation. The point is, well, let's just talk about, like, since we're on oxygen, and it's pretty common, right, to have an oxygen fish kill. And the other thing that's pretty common is for after a fish kill, everybody's in a mad panic. You'll be hearing from the homeowners association. You'll be hearing from anybody at the homeowners association who happens to have your phone number. You'll be hearing from the neighbors across the street from the homeowners association. For those of you, in the pond business, you can name your price pretty much. Say, look, this is above and beyond what you're asking for, is above and beyond the contract. And it's one of the rare situations where you say this is going to be an additional charge, and they usually don't have a problem paying that, especially when you had water quality testing in the contract that they line itemed out. You can go ahead and get all that money back plus about 10 times if you so choose to. Um, but like I said, the water test, if we had a monthly water test done on the 1st and you have a kill on the 15th, that water test done on the 1st isn't going to help you very much, clue you in. And then also too, you'll get every time you get a fish kill, they're going to want you to run a panel. They're going to want you to run every water quality test. We need to check for bacteria loading, fecal coliform is an example. We need to check for chemical spills. We need to check for, all this water quality stuff that you have to send usually to a lab. You'll grab a sample and send that to a laboratory for accurate results. And like I said, I've been ordered, I've told them, I'm like, I don't think we should run this many water tests. I think you're dealing with, talked about here, it's the hottest time of the year. We're probably having maybe a little rain turnover, a little oxygen depletion. One trick of the trade that you can use, just generally speaking, are you seeing, time of the year, right? When the fish died. So right now, August, and you call me about dead fish, I'm leaning towards oxygen depletion because we understand how oxygen works in hot water. If you call me in the springtime and you say, I've got a bunch of dead fish, I'm leaning towards spawning stress, killing those fish. One just like quick trick, I guess, or idea that I use is, okay, I look at the time of the year and then I look at the species of fish dead. Is it all one species of fish that's dead, or is it multiple species of fish dead? So when you go down there, do you see a bluegill and a crappie and a catfish? You're probably looking at an oxygen kill or a chemical kill, some kind of toxin kill. And if you see all the same species of fish, like you go down there and you see 1,000 dead crappie, but only dead crappie, now you're looking at a spawning stress kill. And I specifically say crappie because that does occur a lot. Like we've talked about many times, you don't want them in smaller bodies of water. They tend to not do well. They tend to stun out. And then a stunted fish population has a reduced immune system. So just a simple annual spawning will kill them. They kind of Mother Nature taking care of the overpopulated crappie. Yeah, it's a good idea. Oh, what is a rain turnover? I said, good. Thank you, Philip. That's a really good question, my friend. Okay. So let's think about how we can easily like visualize this one for a second. Usually I use a cake as an example. Let's pretend we made a cake and it has 2 layers. It has an upper layer. Well, let's make that layer let's say we put green food color in it, right? So the green food coloring layer up here has the oxygen. Then we have a line, like because we have a different layer, just like a cake. We put icing down, right? That icing will represent the thermocline. And then below that green cake, we have chocolate cake, brown cake. And then that layer would represent what in limnology would be the hypolimnion is the correct term, the lower below the thermocline layer. So the upper layer would be the epilimnion, and then the thermocline, and then our brown layer would be the hypolimnion or the water without any oxygen. So what makes the water layer up like that, right? And it's the temperature, because the density of the warmer water, it changes, right? Warmer water is a layer of warmer water is floating on a layer of cooler water, and it doesn't mix together because of the density differences of the water. So your green cake layer has your oxygen and your brown cake layer has no oxygen. And you're going to need a pretty deep pond to see that set up. Shallow ponds, wind and wave action, they won't stratify off like that. So that's why having a consultant at the beginning of your, let's say you're building a pond. I've seen this happen before, where guys have like a 15-acre pond they're building, and they intentionally go dig it 40 feet deep when it all would have been about 10 feet deep. But they go ahead and get the dozers in and do, you know what happens when you start moving dirt like that? You start spending money. And it's because they don't understand that concept. They don't understand small lake management, and they don't understand that at a certain point, the depth in the pond is irrelevant, and you're just creating a layer, the layered situation, and you're just creating a layer of water that in the summer in the south isn't going to have any oxygen. So if it doesn't have any oxygen, it's not going to have any fish. So you dug the thing out. I've seen guys do it plenty of times. And I tell them your fish aren't going to go down that deep. It's too small a pond for that much depth. And then that creates a dangerous situation where I'm using my hand on the screen here. But if we have our oxygenated water is say 10 feet deep, and say pond just under 10 acres would probably be about right. And then we have a section of pond, if the pond is 30 feet deep, then we have a section of water 20 feet deep at the bottom, right? So we have a higher volume of water under the thermocline than above the thermocline. We want to try to avoid that at all costs in our construction phase. We want our green layer, we want it to look opposite. We want our green layer, oxygen layer to be thicker than the bottom layer, right? Because if we get a cool rain, if we get a weather situation that lines up just right when it's super hot, and if we're in the other situation and we've got a smaller volume of water up here than we have with no oxygen down here, when it rains and cools and cool temperatures start cooling this water off, and then you get a lot of rain that cools that water off, you get what's called a turnover. And that's what that means is it mixes together, because the only thing keeping the water layer separate is temperature. So if it cools off enough up here and you have a larger volume of water with no oxygen, your fish die, because it diffuses across and it'll drop the oxygen. There's not enough oxygen in here. And so once it diffuses across the entire water column, it's not enough oxygen and it kills the fish. Does that make sense? Did I explain? I think I explained that right. So that's how you get a rain turnover, and you'll usually only see those on ponds that are really, a pretty deep, a little too deep for their own good, really, like a strip mine or something like that, where you've got even like a 30-acre body of water that's like 75 feet deep, that would be a problem, because you're not going to have oxygen in the summertime all the way down. In a 1-acre pond, I'd say 6-8 feet is usually where they stratify off. And that's why our water depth in our smaller lakes isn't critically important. Now, of course, we don't want it a super shallow pond either, where the whole pond is less than 3 feet deep. All right, now we've got a super hot, we got no depth at all. And that super shallow pond will be really negatively impacted by the heat. So as your water temperature heats up, how you jump in a pond, it gets colder, or a lake, and it gets colder as you go down. Well, as it gets colder as you go down, it's also holding more oxygen as you go down. So if you got no place to go down, then you could have oxygen problems in the heat from a super shallow pond too. And I got a bunch of stuff that I'm going to go back and read real quick, and you guys process that and throw any questions in about it. Hey, Mike, what's going on? Okay, hooking up's got his. All right. Okay, so hooking up saying during the hottest season, so it's during the summertime, wouldn't the bass stay in the shallow, warm water? No. No, that's where the warmer the water, the less the oxygen. The cooler the water, the more. So where you'll find them when it's really hot right now, where you'll find, especially like your big ones, you will be on the thermocline if there is one in your pond. The cooler the water, the more oxygen it gets, there. So you'll find the bass basically find the wood structure. Yes, that's what I'm looking for if I'm doing electrofishing survey. If I'm doing it right now when it's so dang hot, I'm going to be looking for wood around where the thermocline is. And if I have a oxygen meter in a pond, and actually this ties into a post that Phil and I were talking about on Instagram, so I'll tie that in too because I think it's good. But to finish that thought, the pond thermocline can be easily found with your oxygen meter. You put it in the water and you measure it and you move it down a foot and you measure it and you move it down a foot and you measure it. And like I said, once you pass the thermocline with the oxygen meter, you watch it go to zero. It literally has no oxygen under the thermocline. So you mark, okay, we went down 13 feet and the oxygen meter went to zero. Our thermocline's at 13 feet. So then I would use a topo map or a depth finder and kind of look around that and find the structure at that 10 to 13 foot mark. You'll generally find good fish as deep as they can get, but where they can still breathe. And then taking that over to a larger system, and I'm just going to use Lake Lanier because I had to do a speech. I can't even remember the dude's name now, in Georgia years ago, and he had me do a talk about the lake. He's a guide there. And I interviewed, I believe the kid's name was Hunter. He was the biologist, at the lake. And he taught me something about Lanier and about larger lakes that I didn't really know. This is pretty cool. So at Lanier, the thermocline, you got a big 20-something thousand acre highland reservoir, super clear water, super big lake. And that lake will stratify, right? Because it's super deep, like 250 feet near the dam, steep banks, a lot of water depth in Lanier. So one of the fish that they stock for controlling shad and blue herring in the lake is striper. And there's a pretty good striper fishery inland, just north of Atlanta, for anybody who's not familiar with Lake Lanier. That lake stratifies around, I think, 40 or 45 feet deep. So you have the layer of water that we talked about. And it's 45 feet deep. Yes, that's a deep thermocline. But if you have a 200-foot average depth, there's 150 feet under the thermocline. If we think about it like a pond where there is no oxygen, but actually those high, and I don't even know how to explain it. I don't understand this well enough to explain it. But that's not how it works at Lake Lanier. Let me explain. So in the epilimnion upper layer, where the plankton lives and how deep the light can penetrate, and that's another thing to think of too. If you have a pond, say you have a clear pond in Georgia that's 15 feet deep, and most of the time it holds oxygen all the way to the bottom, but you decide to fertilize it. So we're gonna change the visibility. We're going from a clear pond to a pea soup green pond. Okay, that is going to creep the thermocline up. You're reducing the light penetration, the depth that the light can penetrate by the density of the plankton. So it will, adding the fertilizer, growing the plankton, becoming a plankton farmer to boost the productivity of the pond will creep that thermocline up, right? Because the light can't penetrate down anymore. So you're raising the green cake layer, right? We're making that skinnier, less oxygen, deeper, right? We're increasing the hypolimnion, decreasing the epilimnion when we do that. And all lakes naturally do that in their life cycle. And that process is called eutrophication, where you get sediments coming in and you get, in Lake Lanier's example, you get a large population around it. So you've got pet waste washing in, you've got yard fertilizers washing in, you've got, whatever else goes on with the human population that's grown around the lake coming in, doing the exact same thing as what I just described us doing with a fertilizer jug in a pond. So at that 40, 45 foot level where the thermocline is in Lanier, again, we have a warm water layer riding on a cold water, right? So that separates it. That is so different. There's so much difference in the density in the water. The thermocline acts like a false bottom. So the phytoplankton that lives its life cycle and dies, normally it falls to the bottom of the lake. It's microscopic, you can't see it, but normally it'll die and it would fall all the way to the bottom. But in Lanier, it doesn't. Again, the thermocline is so deep, and the transition there, it acts like a false bottom. So it traps the dead plankton at that 40-foot mark, or 45, wherever it is. That's important to understand, because anything rotting in the water, just like I've said before, if we spray plants and anything rotting is oxygen consuming. So, and Lanier is not like the pond. It's not the way I described it. It's more complex, and it's, again, punching above my weight to even describe it. But like osmosis, because the water's so much colder under there, oxygen will diffuse across that thermocline. It won't be as clear cut as it is in the pond. We can't drop it down. We can use the oxygen meter in the same manner in Lanier that we can in like a pond. We won't see it drop out. You'll actually see oxygen levels get higher under the thermocline at Lanier, because that layer of rotting phytoplankton is using oxygen at that 40-foot mark. So you'll see the oxygen level almost drop out at the 40-foot mark. And then because the colder water right under, the oxygen will diffuse across, and you'll actually have oxygen deeper, like 100 feet deep. So sometimes you'll see the striper down, way under the thermocline, because they're cold water fish. They can go down and feed down there and still come back up. But again, the problem Lanier is having is the increase in the eutrophication, or the nutrients that are coming in, is shrinking that epilimnion up, and as it shrinks up, it's moving the thermocline where the striper want to be in the cold water. It's creeping that up, so you're getting a situation where the lake is becoming too warm due to eutrophication to hold a fish like striper. Hope that makes sense. '50s. Wow, it's nice. It's cool, and it's a little bit cooler here in Florida too, man. It was only 88 today. It was nice outside, and it's going to be a little cooler tonight too. That's a good question, Eric. Eric's question is, how does rain affect the nutrients in the plankton? Does rain wash in more nutrients or flush them out? It seems like a coin toss sometimes. The lake will go real green and then clear after a storm. It's a good observation. So that is going to depend on your watershed. That's going to depend on the size of the pond. That's going to depend on what we call a retention time. So let's explain that. Okay, and go back to our example. We've got a new pond, and we're going to try to use fertilizer to boost the plankton to increase the productivity. That's not a practice that can be done anywhere in the country. Some places else in the country, naturally, due to the amount of where you're at. Maybe you're in agriculture where there's been a lot of fertilizers onto the ground. You have a higher, you have perfect water quality conditions to grow plankton, and you have a lot of nutrients coming in. You wouldn't in a pond that, in that area, you couldn't use fertilizer. Adding fertilizer would kill it. You can't do it in some places. But in Georgia, where we have low productivity, and in the Southeast, really, where we have low productivity in many places, you can. So as we talk about these things, it depends on where you are. But this is a great question because it also depends on the amount of runoff that you have. And what's very common in Georgia is someone who goes on the internet and wants to do the fertilization, but they don't understand retention time. So what I have to do to get a fertilizer program to work is I need to calculate that. And how do you calculate retention time? I take a 5-gallon bucket and I stick it under the pipe at the back, and I see how fast the 5-gallon bucket fills up. So I know the flow rate coming out, and I extrapolate that out to 30 days. So if I get, let's just say 5 gallons in 5 seconds, right? And then I just extrapolate that number out, how much flows in a day, how much flows in a month. That way, if you're, let's see, it's hard to explain. If the volume of water in the pond, so I would go then do an average depth of the pond, and I know the surface acreage, you can use Google Earth for that. If the volume of water in the pond flows out the back in less than 30 days, that bucket is higher, the flow rate is higher than what is actually held in the pond for 30 days. Fertilizer won't work. It'll just run right out the back on you. So you'll see that in like your ponds under 10 acres. The smaller the pond gets, the harder it's going to be to fertilize, especially if it's a stream fed pond that catches a lot of water. It's just going to wash your fertilizer out the back. And I've seen more times than I can count guys who are thinking that they're doing a good job fertilizing their pond, and all they're doing is fertilizing the stream behind the pond. It's not changing the plankton density. They're not getting what they want done simply because of the flow rate. That's a real common. We could have put that one on the rookie mistakes. I didn't go there with that. So in that scenario, if you're in that scenario and your fertilizer's not working, it's not an option for you, but it's okay because we have fish feeders and we can just directly feed the bluegill daily and boost our productivity using feed instead of fertilizer. Good question, Eric. No, well, yeah, Mike, he's a good question here. Do river systems ever experience a turnover, or is it just lakes and ponds? Sure. Phil Hutchinson and I were talking about fishing the turnover in the Chattahoochee River behind Lake Lanier. So when the lake turns over, that water's flowing out the back of the dam. So yes, in a tailwater fishery like the Chattahoochee River, the river will experience a turnover because the lake water turned over. But no, generally speaking, like a natural river that doesn't have a man-made impoundment and all that nonsense on it, no, because it's flowing, right? It's constantly moving, and that flow is a big part of the oxygenation of a river. It's kind of a little different situation. Not that plankton doesn't live in the river water, it does, and not that it does photosynthesize, but it's not stagnant, it's flowing, and that flow creates, waterfalls and movement and increased surface area. Because of the flow, more water gets to the surface and you get better oxygenation in the river due to flow than you would in a pond or a lake. Yeah, man. Arkansas is saying he had no idea about Lanier, and yeah, me neither, man. I didn't know. I was writing it down, nerding out. It's pretty cool. Information. The information. Throat's a little scratchy and dry. 34 minutes. I don't know. I felt like that was pretty good. That was a good little transition there, boys. Like that's good information. If there are any more questions in there, I'll be glad to cover them. I'm just scrolling back real quick, make sure I didn't miss anybody's. Sometimes they go through, and I'm trying not to watch it because then it breaks my train of thought. Rain turnover, covered that. I've seen a mistake. I'm looking at Arkansas's name there, the pond stalkers, and I'm looking at thinking about, like, I can remember one conversation that I had. A guy was talking about eradicating fish. They use in pond and hatchery ponds are not the same as sport fishing ponds. They're not managed the same at all. A hatchery pond is used to grow one species of fish, a lot of one species of fish, like bluegill. Right? They have a pond for bluegill. They don't mix them all together. They have a pond for bluegill, and they feed that pond for bluegill. So one way, like if you had to eradicate that for whatever reason, you could use a couple different products. Most of the time in pond management, we'll use a product called rotenone. And rotenone is a ground up plant from a root, I believe it's from South America, and I believe it was called a Dearest plant, but I'm going way back in the memory banks there. Anyway, rotenone is the chemical that we use to kill the fish in a pond, and you don't want to breathe it because it'll do your blood the same way it does there. What rotenone does is it binds to the red blood cells in the fish, it goes across the gills, gets into the blood, and it binds to the red blood cell. Once it's bound to the red blood cell can't carry oxygen, and you can suffocate a fish population. Rotenone will detoxify out very quickly in the summer when it's warmer, and it'll stay if you use it in the fall and it gets cold on you quick, it'll linger in the water all winter for a much longer period of time than it would be if you use it into the summer. Another way that you can punch them out if you need to is hydrated lime. You can use hydrated lime to swing the pH rapidly to kill the fish. Don't recommend that one. If you got to eradicate your fish population and start it over, just get yourself a pro. You're dealing with dangerous stuff. But you will see sometimes, if the fish hatchery is starting a pond over, they'll pull the water down. And that's another point too. If you're going to eradicate your fish population, you always need to drain the pond down as much as possible, so you have a smaller volume of water to treat, because it's impossible to treat a pond that's full with enough rotenone or lime or any other product that's eradicating your fish. There'll be holes and spaces where that you can't get a solid, complete treatment, and the fish will go find that and hide in there on you and live through the treatment. Seen that play out a bunch of times. They don't drain the pond and think they're going to put rotenone in there and kill the fish, and they don't. And they got bass left over, and then they bring 2-inch bluegill in. There's already a few adult bass in the pond, or just bass this big is all you need, and your balance is disrupted before you ever even get a start, because the bass are feeding on those bluegill, and that's a big mistake. But I've seen guys in Facebook chat groups and stuff talk about, well, I'm not using rotenone, I'm using hydrated lime because that's what they use to fish hatchery. Well, that's great, Chief, but you ain't in a fish hatchery. You don't want to hydrate lime. You could use hydrated lime, in a pond and use it effectively. I've done it. But you don't want to do that to your soil, because you're swinging the soil content too. That lime goes right to the bottom and changes the pH of the soil, which greatly reduces the aquatic insect population, which is a vital source of food for your bluegill in a sport fishing pond. It's not a vital source of food for bluegill in a fish hatchery pond, because they feed them feed. So they don't care that they're swinging the soil pH a bajillion, whatever pH points, because they're not relying on the insect population the way we are in a sport fishing population. So just because they do it at a fish hatchery doesn't make it safe to do at your pond. So that's kind of a nerve I've had touched once or twice. "170 acres of water, 50 feet deep, with 6 feet of visibility." That's a good point too. I'm gonna use Hooking Up's little post there. I asked people what their visibility is, and they don't know what I mean. So there is a black and white disc. I've actually got a Amazon influencers page that I never hardly make any money on, but there's products in there, pond products, pond chemicals you can order from Amazon. And then anything you order, I get a cut, and I busted my ass for a year getting that thing established. And now, nobody ever uses it or buys anything. But one of the products on there is called a Secchi, Secchi, I believe it's spelled Secchi. It's named after the dude that invented it, scientist. It's a black and white disc with a rope, and the rope has measurements, and you drop there's actually a little weight on the bottom of the disc as well, so it stays upright when you put it in the water. And you drop that down and you read the rope. Like in your example, we see the Secchi disc disappear at 6 feet deep. And like most people will look at the water and go, "Oh, I can see those rocks, and I'm about 6 feet tall, so it's 6 feet of visibility." It's not how that works. You need to measure like me to give me an accurate visibility. So when I ask someone, "What's the visibility of the water?" I need it done with a Secchi disc, not with a guess. And that's important for if you're a client of mine, like if I'm consulting with you and I ask you what the visibility of the water is, I need that measurement done with one of those discs, or at least something along those lines. Anything shiny is fine. That would give you visibility. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Secchi disc, but again, it's a standard. It's a standard way to measure the visibility so scientists can communicate to one another in the same way. Like measuring the fish, we close the mouth, we butt the bottom lip on a largemouth will stick out a little bit, so that you close it, you bump that bottom lip to the edge of the board, you pinch and fan the tail, right? And you look at the furthest distance that the fish tail touches. Even if the fish tail's damaged, you would mark that in the notes that it had a damaged caudal fin, but you don't make up the measurement. If its tail's chopped off, you give it wherever the furthest. You make a note of it, but you give it the furthest place that the fish touches, right? And that's the total length of the fish. And that's a standard that all scientists use. So there's no discrepancy in the measurement from person to person. Midwest, welcome in, my friend. All the way from Chicago. It brings up an interesting point of the guy that bought my company was out of Chicago. So whenever you sell a company, generally there's a transition period that you stay on and work for them while that process, it's just kind of a lawyer deal, when you don't sell out and then leave. A lot of times you sell out and then work there for a while. And my prison sentence there was 24 months. I've told the story before, but I'll tell it again. Oh, absolutely, Midwest. Anytime, man. Appreciate you guys coming in and listening to it. I want the fish to be healthier. I want the water to be healthier. I want the misconceptions to go away. I doubt that's ever going to happen in my lifetime, but it is what it is. So anyway, I had to travel to Chicago several times in that 24-month period up there to the buyout company. And I got to see how they managed theirs versus how I managed mine. And there's two funny stories there. Part of their business plan was selling and storing aerators and fountains in Atlanta ponds. And I didn't say anything during the buyout process when they were telling me this. I didn't bring this up until after the contract was already signed. They made boatloads of money putting out fountains and aerators in the spring and taking them up in the winter and putting them up, running maintenance on them, changing oil in them, charging a storage fee for the fountain or aerator at their facility, and then putting it back out the next spring. It's funny, fountains and aerators are funny too, because it seems like they sell, for some reason, they sell really well in some parts of the country and they don't at all. And Atlanta, Georgia is a place where if you can sell a fountain in Atlanta, Georgia, you can sell ice to an Eskimo. It's not something I tried, didn't work. So the point of that was they don't leave the fountains out for the ice over. And none of those geniuses figured out it don't ice in Georgia. Why would anybody take the fountain out of the water? They don't. They run them till they die and put another one out there. There's no storage. There's no maintenance. There's no nothing. Ball till you fall in the A and go get a new one if they buy it from you at all. So those guys had this huge business. They just looked around all the ponds and thought about all the sales that they were going to make. And then I found it funny to watch them fall flat on their ass, and I couldn't make them because I couldn't make them either. And and I made that point in the meeting with the Bobs. You guys seen Office Space? You should have seen their face. Yeah, like why do they take why do they take the fountains out? Because of the ice. I'm like, there's an ice in Georgia. Whoa, crickets. Chirp, chirp. Chirp, chirp. Yeah. So the other thing that happened that just I got a good chuckle out of was the dude that was my supervisor was on a power trip, as most supervisors like to be. And I just kind of did my own thing, flowed with the things as I went. And their situation was in the Midwest. The Midwest, I actually had a conversation with a biologist from up there not long ago, talking about the differences between treating southern ponds and northern ponds. And the water quality is completely different. The, hardness and alkalinity, completely light years apart, really low in Georgia, really high up there. So it has a binding quality. The higher you'll see in Georgia or in the Southeast, if you have a small pond that's filled off a well, that's a different water quality source that's usually higher in minerals and stuff than if it's fed through our poor soil, like through the ground. So you'll see well-fed ponds behave more like Midwestern ponds as far as treatments go than you do normal Southern ponds. So it was, this is how it was addressed to me, because I had went and treated a pond for an algae problem that came up every spring. They only treated it like 20 years in a row, whatever. And I would get away with like under the label rate, like they say 1 to 2 gallons per acre of cutrine or whatever. I wouldn't even do 1 gallon. I could be down near a quart, a half a gallon. Didn't need to put 2 gallons per acre out because the lower rate works just fine. And then up there, it's the opposite because they have so much minerals in the water. The lower rate, actually the upper rate is sometimes useless. Sometimes they've just got to go and treat because the water's binding the chemical out before it ever kills the algae. So they go spray 2 gallons per acre and don't get very good results because of their water quality. not because the chemical doesn't work. It's just a binding, how the water binds things. It's chemistry, you know. So he ordered me to go to a place with 18 parts per million hardness and alkalinity, around 20, really low, and treat at the max rates, because we're losing money the way you're treating it. We can be making, you know, another gallon per acre of, you know, 400% markup on the product. And I said, nah, chief, I'm not doing that. Oh my God, did the dude hit the ceiling? Insubordination, he started. He said, and I said, okay, I don't care. You can call me insubordinate all you want, but if you treat at that rate in that pond, you're going to kill every fish in it with copper toxicity, and we're going to get sued at a rate. When you kill a fish with a chemical, boy, the lawyers, the environmental lawyers will have a field day on your ass, and you're setting yourself up for a nice fat lawsuit to God knows how much they can get out of you. It's a really bad idea to kill fish with chemicals as a professional. And he knows that, you know, but again, he lives in a place that's never ventured outside of that area to know the differences in water quality and to know how that works at all. So I didn't either until I started branching out and going different places, doing different treatments, you know, traveling the country. Things are different places. Yeah. Yeah. Midwest, we have chatted about it before, that you would add fertilizer in ponds. That blows his mind. As you know, they fight eutrophication. Exactly right. Midwest is actually an environmental lawyer. He'd be the guy lighting my ass up if I didn't know what I was doing. I like to pretend like I'm a gangster and I got lawyers, you know, on my side. That's right, Philip. That's right. Changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes. And you're absolutely right, Midwest. They actually have, right out the gate in the Midwest, they have got what would happen to us if we over fertilized, you know, naturally occurring over fertilized water. So that's why it's easier to sell aerators and fountains, to break up, you know, to try to keep the water a little bit cooler, to move the water around, right? It's a lot easier to sell those products when you get annual fish kills. You don't get those in Georgia. So just like I said with the water quality testing, when there's a fish kill, it's easy to sell a water quality test. It's easy to sell $5,000 worth of water testing. Super easy when the fish are dead, right? Not so easy when they don't die, though. And the sales for the fountains follow that same trend. If you don't have people whipped up into a panic with a dead fish population, they're not buying that crap. Wouldn't either. So that's one reason why we see a difference. You know, just like Philip just said, changes in latitudes, changes in attitudes. How you been, Midwest, man? Good to see you again. Midwest been around however long I've been doing this. 5 years, I guess. Glad you can make it aboard, my friend. Hope I don't ever need your services. Anyway, we're running close to an hour. Any other questions? We can cut it off now. I feel like we're kind of at a natural stopping point. I think we've done actually, I think today was the best one I've done yet. That one's flowed pretty well. And for anybody new or tuning in, September 4th, we're going to have Steve Barden, Texas Pro Lake, on, and talk with Preston Chrisman, Fisheries Science. He's got the Fisheries Science page that I copy on my stories, and Preston was out there as well at the Black Bass Emporium, I think they called it, the Black Bass meeting they had in there. I was really wanting to go, but I have to work for a freaking living. I couldn't go out there and check that out. So I'm going to touch with those two gentlemen who, hey, thanks, Arkansas. I appreciate that, buddy. Thanks for all the support. Yeah, I'm glad you came in too, Midwest. I appreciate you all the support over the years. He fell out. We didn't talk for a couple years, man. I was worried about you. I thought you might have fallen off this dimension on us, but I'm glad to see you. Oh, that's a good question, Philip. What is the goal with the dailies? Yes. So, Fishing MD, there's my guy. All right, we're getting all the old school players in here now. So good question, Phil. And well, for 4 years on Instagram, I posted daily, sometimes multiple times per day. And all that copies over to Facebook as well. So it's the meta pages. The entire idea for me, since I'm not doing this for a living anymore, was to combat the misinformation about fisheries management and make a passive income for myself on information that I feel I'm pretty good at explaining. I don't think that's being greedy or anything. I think both can go hand in hand. Or I'm a greedy bastard, whatever. I don't care. So pretty average, if there's 20K in followers over on Instagram. So over a 4-year period, that's like 5,000 subs a year. That's coming up pretty good, especially for Instagram. It's hard to climb up on Instagram. But I've noticed over, the past year, maybe 18 months or whatever, now it's only gone up like 700 people in 18 months. The Instagram following has stalled out. I don't know if the page has been shadow banned because I talk about killing fish. That's a possibility. They don't let you know that kind of stuff. They could take it away tomorrow. They could say, you know what, you're not talking about this anymore, and it's gone, right? That was one of the reasons why I came to YouTube, because I think what I'm talking about naturally fits on YouTube a little bit better for people with ponds than what you can do on Instagram. It's easier to go back and look at videos, go back and watch these, just an easier format. And YouTube is a much fairer in their compensation packaging and their advertising things. Facebook and Facebook and Instagram are working for slave wages, like I said on one post the other day, the money generated off what I've done here in a week is more money than I made off 30 days worth of posts on Facebook last month. It's a joke. So part of my goal, I'm informing people, but the other part of that is you're not making any money to do it. You're working for free, pretty much. And it's insulting. It's just plain insulting. And like, why don't I get the boast of learn get a college degree on this site? They promote 20 people a month that way on Instagram. Why doesn't my page get something like that? Get a little help from Meta, a little kick like that. Don't get it. Never again. How many more years do I got to work? A decade to get that? I mean, how long do I got to work for nothing? So personally, I'm just insulted by it, Meta, and the way I've been treated. And I'm not insulted by YouTube. And so I've found myself, as probably we all do, watching YouTube, right? I watch a lot of YouTube. I look at a lot of things. Heck, we got kicking off in the end of the month here, man. I got my Bulldogs kicking off. And I watch college football podcasts that come on daily. And those guys have more followers than I have here on YouTube. And they have engagement like we're getting here. And people come on and talk about college football like all day long. And I'm like, well, maybe there should be a fish daily. Why not? Maybe I can get that, Don't see why not. So that's how we got here, Phil. No, that's cool, man. I don't mind. We're going to go over all this stuff a bajillion times as new people come in anyway. So, actually, and that's one thing I feel like I'm guilty of, Phil. I'll say it once and expect everyone to go and look at it. Like I'm thinking that everybody's watching this. So sometimes I don't repeat myself enough. And it's good to hear information over and over again too, because that's a learning process, right? When you don't understand, and it falls along the lines of some of the videos that I've watched with the psychology guy or whatever. And we talked about it the other night, where like a bulk of our population is about 12 years old mentally. And once you realize that, when you walk around in the world, you realize why the world works like it does. And then when you frame it that way in your head, it's easier to deal with. Same thing applies there, Yeah, fishing. I got off doing it for a while. Really had some health problems. I'm finally getting those ironed out, and hopefully could get some treatments. You'll see me itching my nose. It's a neurological. It's probably from being around pond chemicals too much. Honestly, nobody can really tell me what's going on. It might be thyroid. Not sure yet, but speaking, I'm having neurological problems when I speak a lot like this. So I just took a break. Yeah, Midwest. I'm in a catch-22 on Instagram. In my heart, I want to say F you and take it down. I put in so much work for nothing. On the flip side of that, I put in so much work that, I don't want it. I don't want to do that too. Like that's the catch-22. I'd be disappointed if it was gone and that resource wasn't there for those people, because I think it is a good place if you're willing to scroll back and read. And then also too, that brings up another point back to Philip's question. The format in which I'm doing that on Instagram, short format video seems to be ruling ever since TikTok really fired up. The 1 to 3 minute videos are the way to drive your social media, boys. So if you're trying to get a following, punch those reels, punch those shorts, work those every day. Don't worry about the posts as much as like I do. Now the reason why I went back, if you noticed, if you watch that pattern, I was doing that. I was using the reels quite a bit and getting some followers that way. Maybe I should go back to do that. I don't want to do those. This is very easy for me to do. Turn on the computer, pop on the mic, let's rock and roll. It's much more difficult for me to edit, and I'm 52, man. I'm not that guy. I'm learning as I go here on all this computer stuff. So I'm behind the 8 ball there on the editing and all that stuff. And it's a lot harder and I'm working more for free than doing this. This is easy for me. That is much harder for me. So let's just say none of it grows and none of it goes. I would rather have the easier way to do this in the lives than to have to go and format this into videos. But I didn't touch on that. I think that's how this works. I don't know if the watch hours that you guys are watching right now as the live count towards pay. I think live is just live. At least that's how it worked when I was not monetized on YouTube. But now that I am monetized on YouTube, I'm not sure if these viewer hours count towards being paid or not. It used to not. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But once I turn this off, if you'll notice, I'll go in, I'll put a photo in there, like whatever. Maybe I don't know what I'll put on this photo. I'll just go pick a random one, usually a G-Crack something, whatever. Shout out to G-Crack real quick. Do one for Homeless and his pink lemonade bellow stick in the 5.8. How about that? Maybe we'll put that up there for him. So, well, now I lost my train of thought because I was reading. Crap. What was I just talking about? Oh, monetization. I have to go in and turn on monetization for this live. And then anybody who watches this after, I think, is how I get paid. So there's 8 or 10 of us watching. It'll show that instantly. So many people came on and watched. I think you have to, if people click in and click out, if we had 10 or 11, now there's 8. You have to watch for a certain period of time just to get that credit. And then once you get that credit, then any amount of time that they do watch, you get money for. But I think it's because it would make sense to me that there's no commercials in this, right? They can't stop this live and put in a commercial for you to watch. So that might be why it doesn't pay while you're live, but it does, because I have a tab I have to click on there that says, I always just put the maximum amount of advertising in there. Again, just to try to drive revenue and pay the bills, Yeah, I know, man. And that goes back to the first one we did. Let's see, Hooking Up has got one. I have a short in YouTube with 156 cows, $15. Maybe about $350. Yeah, they'll run different deals on Instagram too. Like sometimes I went on you. I started going back to the posts because they're running. They want people to go back to the post, so they're running a bonus for doing posts. So that's kind of why I got away from the shorts and went back to the post. Well, 2 reasons: the labor intensiveness. It's easier for me to do the post than it is the short because I don't have to edit any video, do voiceover, all that kind of crap. It's just a faster workflow process for me. And again, since you're working for pennies, why work harder for pennies when you can just do this or do the posts? The posts are easy for me. I just type in an idea into AI, and AI, rephrases and does all the spell check, and I just copy and paste the post into Instagram. So I don't work very hard to do that thanks to ChatGPT. But yes, the monetization changes, and I'm not trying to get rich. I don't anticipate getting rich. It's funny too how we see the same pattern here that I saw in my actual business. It's really hard to consult with someone who thinks they already know what you're talking about, right? These guys go bass fishing and think that they know all the stuff that we're talking about here. But that's not possible to do. Going bass fishing is not going to make you a scientist. It'll make you a good fisherman. I'm sure most of the people here are better fishermen than I am, right? How well I fish is irrelevant to how well I articulate fishery science. Not the same thing. Not even the same sport, boys. I'm in a completely different stadium. And with that being said, and an hour and 8 in, let's call it a day. I think I'm going to take tomorrow off. Maybe come back Sunday night. Maybe do a little buzzbait fishing about this time of day because we've got some nice cooler weather, and maybe I can catch a nice fish tomorrow. But again, I greatly appreciate everyone. I really do consider you guys friends of mine, although we probably haven't met. Phil, I got to fish together once. That was really great. We need to do that together. Get together again, Phil. Do some fishing. And for any of you guys that are here, if you find yourself in Central Florida, drop a DM. You guys always have a spot on my boat. We'll go roll out. All right, boys. I'll see you Sunday night. Appreciate it.